Good afternoon, everyone. Hope you're enjoying your time here. One of the benefits of hosting the event is that you get to invite your friends to to participate, and having Todd here was an excuse for me to reconnect with Todd. You might already know of his background, having spent 10 years running one of the largest divisions at HP, a $60 billion department. President at TIPCO, at Palm, and now is the CEO of Mozido. But for me, Todd has been a really great influence and mentor, in my life, someone who I've looked up to. And when we have so many people who come around the world ask us, what's special about Silicon Valley? It's really this idea that people pay it forward. And if I, reach out to Todd and ask Todd for a favor, he will, always, return that call. So I'm honored to have Todd here. We're going to talk a little bit about kind of the future of mobile pay and what Mozido is doing, and then we'll have a brief conversation and then open it up for questions. But before we dive into Mozido and your efforts there, I'd just be curious. You've had a lot of different experiences working at big companies, now working at a private kind of startup environment. What can you share with some of the entrepreneurs in the audience about making that transition from kind of big company to startup, and how can they go about approaching some of these companies to kind of drive some business outcomes?
Sure. Well, thanks for that exceptionally gracious introduction. I appreciate it. And Marlon and I have worked together kind of across the gamut of profit, nonprofit, important things over the past probably more years than either one of us want to admit. But look, I think one of the things, I never tend to think of things in terms of size. I tend to think of them in terms of challenge and opportunity. Clearly HP, the PC business when I went there was big, but the opportunity was bigger. And the opportunity to focus on products that really mattered to people was bigger. So I don't think in those kind of terms of sizes as much. Now, there are lots of times at Mozido I wish I had the cash in the bank we had at HP, but that's as some of you probably can concur, a different set of challenges. And I think, Palm was kind of the same way. Palm had a reputation and a public image that was bigger than the reality of the company. But again, it was what was important about mobile computing. And then, as that market, and today we call it pivoting, right? As the whole market pivoted from kind of the tethered PDA to untethered wireless devices, how are we going to not participate, but how are we going to win? How are we going to thrive? And in that situation, like many, it came to really knowing your customer. Was our customer now we'll really date ourselves, right? The iPod was coming out. BlackBerry was kind of coming out. And so who was our customer? Clearly, we could have pivoted into a mobile media type of device. But our customer was one who was going to step up from the Palm Pilot. I think you're probably the only one, the three of us are probably the only ones that had Palm Pilots. But who was going to step from a Palm Pilot to a Trio at that point? And that really was our customer, and we built a great company on top of that.
Absolutely. And as you think about, so for maybe on the flip side, how can corporations continue to think and act like a startup? Keep that, HP was built on the garage, but yet, innovation seems to be something that's always out of reach.
Yeah, it's always out of reach. I think it's a really hard question. And then sometimes, and I'll just speak from my own experiences, you get into the law of big numbers. And I guess, I'll tell you a story. We did the first smart book with Sundar at Google in like 2005. And nobody ever remembers it. It was probably one of the most successfully innovative failures I've ever participated in. So we took what was then Android, we scaled it to a 10-inch screen, we built a great product, We cut a deal with Telefónica España, so you would sell it as a bundled device. But in 2005, really nobody knew what to do with a product that didn't have function-definite software on it. What do you do with a device that just has a browser? And Google Docs was early, and the Google Suite was early, and I think we built 40,000 of those devices and sold significantly less than that. But it was a phenomenal product, and it was the first kind of Google Docs Android book there was. And we learned a lot, and the Google guys learned a lot, and we pivoted from it. So I think, and I'm giving a very long answer to your question, the challenge in big companies really becomes more of a balance sheet question than an innovation question. You know, can you sustain something that's in essence not going to move the needle in those quarter-to-quarter cycles that you get yourself hung up in? So I think we focused a lot on innovation that mattered to customers, innovation that mattered to our partners and our employees, but you've got to figure out how to get it at scale. You know, one of the other, I mean, it's a bad thing when you're our age now, Marlon, as you can think through the things that would have been phenomenal successes. We tried to do a deal at Palm where we're going to bundle Palm products, good software on Dell servers. And that would have created really the first, back then, well, in today's world, it would be cloud-based email. In that world, it was, I don't know what it was, software embedded on a server. And, you know, it was really a precursor to what what BlackBerry became. But in the world of Dell's server business, they didn't see how it would become big enough or compelling enough. So, I mean, innovation in big companies will be, I think, a challenge for eons to come. Yeah. And I think the opportunity is sometimes you buy it, right? You use the balance sheet, and you find, I'll just pick on Frank, who's probably got a phenomenally innovative SaaS company. We buy it. And then the real secret sauce is, how do you not kill it? And that's as tough. And look, fundamentally, it boils to leadership and the willingness to enable and to create an environment that enables everyone to succeed.
Absolutely. I'll just pick up on one of your points. You talked about, you know, innovation that matters, and you know, you mentioned how we've been engaged in both for-profit and non-profit pursuits. Mozido is definitely a for-profit, you know, company, but I think it's really solving a social you know, challenge, which is, you know, you got 1/3 of the world is unbanked, and you have, you know, 2 billion smartphones out there. So what is Mozido doing to kind of make mobile payment or mobile, you know, transactions mainstream?
Sure. So when we think about the trans-border remittance of money, which is fundamentally what we think about, to Marlon's point, I think there are 11 billion smartphones in the world. There are 2 billion people in the world who have a phone but do not have a bank account. The largest corridor in the world of remittances is, you know, the U.S. to Mexico. Fine. But it's closely followed by places like the United Arab Emirates to the Philippines, U.S. to China, Western to Eastern Europe. And so as we thought about how do we engage with these people, I mean, not to be disparaging, but these are probably not going to be the first people in line to buy an iPhone 7. A lot of these guys will have 10-year-old, you know, you go to the Middle East, they have 10-year-old StarTACs from Motorola. And you know, the banking world, in that world, is you work all week, the truck comes on Thursday, you get your paycheck, you go to a small money exchange house, which is really small, it's like a little shop, You pay about $15 to send your money back to your family, wherever they may be. Southwest Asia for the most part. What we've looked at and created is a technology that's both device and software agnostic. So our product can run on any phone ever made, as long as you can text. The only, I guess, precursors, you have to be able to text, which covers a lot. And we've looked hard at how do we take that information and create what's called a tokenization, if any of you guys do financial services, tokenize the account in the cloud. So our product is a cloud-based, secure enough to meet any of the US regulatory requirements for banking security. Cloud-based so that you can take it anywhere and use it anytime and probably do that transaction for $3. And so we look at how do we disrupt, not the senders and receivers, right, because you got Western Union and a shop, but the rails that sit in the middle. And as we can disrupt those rails, then we'll enable that family in Sri Lanka to now get their funding, their weekly money from Germany for a much, much lower cost, and we'll participate in the transaction, obviously. We've done a lot of work in China. We own a company called Payees in China that does all of the gateway work for people like Apple. So one of the unique differentiators in China, and this is very different than the cross-border remittance, but you know, everybody will say, well, you know, how do you compete with Alipay? How do you compete with TenPay? Well, we don't require you as a merchant to physically be located on the Alipay store. We allow apple.co.cn to sell directly to you as an individual. We let you buy iTunes as an individual in the same type of Apple environment that you'd get here. And then we back-end process the funding to take it out of China, which is a challenge. But the other piece that I think is so important about what we do, obviously the market's huge. How we disrupt it will be as much, if not more, a marketing challenge as it is a technology challenge. Because today, right, you go to some of these places, you know, that little bodega in a neighborhood in Venezuela, you go to get your bread, your milk, your groceries, and you receive your payments. And in many cases, you'll make payments. You'll pay your utilities or your water bill there. And we're looking at how we create the ability for that customer to do that all from his or her phone. And it's a big, interesting, and important challenge.
And so if we loop back to kind of where we started, I mean, Mozido's up to about 500 employees, and so it's no longer, I don't think you can call yourself a startup maybe so much. How are you going to stay ahead of the innovation curve and not become kind of that set in stone, archaic company?
Yeah. Well, look, a big piece of our, I think a big piece of all these opportunities, all these businesses, centers around focus, and focus on product and customer. And, you know, you'll see us probably become smaller to become bigger. You'll see us sell some pieces of our business to focus on that trans-border remittance. By the way, the total market of trans-border remittance is about $1 trillion. So you only need to get a little piece of that to have a big piece. So we don't think about it as much in terms of people. A large part of that workforce is in China. We'll think about it far more from that perspective of where do we get the right people? How do we create a value proposition that's so compelling and then scale astronomically from there? And to be frank, I've told a lot of people, I'm sure a lot of you guys get the same question, well, when do you want to go public? You know what the answer is? when our customers are ready for us to. I don't look at going public, or frankly at HP, I never looked at market share as an objective. I looked at it as the result of doing lots of things well. And I think of it the same way here. It's the result of doing lots of things well.
Are there any technologies that you wouldn't say are necessarily core to your business right now, but that you could see having an impact down the road?
That are core?
That maybe are core now, or that you see kind of maybe a year from now that could be the...
Look, I think, yes, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Yeah, look, I think the whole, and we've started to kind of think about what is the kind of augmented reality piece of this mobile payment world. Because I think it's going to become such a big, the AR, VR, kind of pick your poison, is going to become such an important technology in the world. A lot of the work around tokenization, and I'm kind of, this is A, B, C, and D, how we continue to keep secure tokenization for money is a huge, huge piece of what we do. We've got over 100 patents today. We've got about 25 licenses in China. So we deal in a very aggressive entrepreneurial world that's hyper-regulated. And I don't think of our patent portfolio from anything other than I don't think of it as a way to monetize. I think of it as a way to protect and grow, and we'll continue to be pretty aggressive from that perspective. A lot of what we'll do will be around mobile wallets. And I talked about how we create technology for those rails. Obviously, what follows is how do you create the wallet that the rails send from and receive to? I really want that person that stands in line in Abu Dhabi on a Thursday afternoon to never have to do that. And look, the obvious big partners, actually there are three, right? Obviously, telcos are big partners. Banks are big partners, both for fundamentally the same reason, right? How do we attract and retain a new customer? I frankly think the next big kind of vertical of partners will be the super large retailers. I mean, you've already seen Walmart spend a lot of time on financial products, financial services. And I think you'll see that proliferate across large retail chains. When you think about, in my world of trans-border remittance, your ability to go do that, send, receive, Walmart in Redwood City to a Walmart in Guadalajara, it's going to make a lot of sense. So that was a long, rambling answer to your question. I'm sorry.
And how do you engage with the startup ecosystem? Are you intentional about trying to identify opportunities, or is it more reactive to what you see in the...
No, we're pretty deliberate. I mean, we're very deliberate in how we think about that world. We don't tend to have the classic funders or participate in that venture ecosystem that you see here. I mean, our funders are Wellington, which is kind of big blue chip fund. Julian Robertson, who runs Tiger Global, which again, big global fund. Interestingly enough, Sheikh Nahyan, who is the sovereign ruler of Abu Dhabi, and MasterCard, who's an obvious strategic partner. So we don't participate in a broad ecosystem the way you think of here in the Valley. But I think we're very deliberate as we look at tokenization on phones, and what it takes in banks. There's some very interesting, almost like bank-in-a-box businesses around India, where there are companies that have tens of thousands of boxes like the size of that machine. That's not an ATM in our way of thinking of an ATM, but almost an actual bank that replaces a teller. And our ability to work with them in those types of broad distribution networks is important.
Okay. Well, I've kind of dominated the questions here. I thought maybe we could open it up for any audience questions. It looks like we have one here in the front and will be number here in the back.
I'm Zdravko from Minerva Schools, and we're a university that will travel to 7.
I think he's going to bring you up.
I'm Zdravko from Minerva Schools, and we're a university that will travel to 7 different cities across the world. So obviously, the global aspect of this summit is very important, but also perhaps Mozido will be very important for us when we travel and have to deal with banks. But my question especially is, how do you balance the relationship between the board, your employees, and such a multinational and broad customer base? What comes first, and how do you mitigate, the problems with that?
Look, we have a pretty decent board. It's not a very, I mean, obviously coming from HP, I've dealt with some very difficult board situations. But we have a very supportive board. I don't know how else to describe it. It's not contentious, it's collaborative and good. Early in my career, I worked for this kind of late stage startup called Federal Express before it was a billion-dollar company. Back in the day, right, to be $1 billion in sales in 10 years was a phenomenon. And we focus on 3 things: people, service, and profit. And the strategy was, if you took care of your people, obviously from a compensation perspective, but from a training perspective, from a development perspective, from an environmental perspective, they in turn would provide phenomenal service to your customers. It would then in turn provide phenomenal profit to your shareholders. And I'll tell you, as complicated or as simple as I've seen things over the years, that thought process has always proven to be true.
Hi. Thank you so much for being here. It's really great to hear your insights. So in your business, how do you worry about cybersecurity for your business, and what kind of processes have you put in place in order to protect your customers as well as yourself?
Yeah, well, look, I have to tell you, frankly, I worry about cybersecurity kind of across the gamut of my life. So we spend a lot of time within Mozido understanding. I think we've gained a lot of benefit from being able to provide tokenization in the cloud. We've gotten a lot of benefit from we've gotten a lot of benefit from that. A lot of benefit from having the diverse platform that we have. We very tactically have outside firms that kind of test us and hack us and attack us. So yes, we worry about it a lot. We worry about as much, well, look, in our world, you have to think about it not only from, somebody's going to hack an account, but when you get into transborder remittance, you get into a lot of homeland security types of regulatory environments. And in the financial services industry, you have a big phenomenon called KYC, Know Your Customer, which literally means know your customer. So yeah, we worry about it. We test for it. We live by a philosophy of never say never. I don't care how good it is. The better it is, the bigger the challenge it is for a hacker somewhere in the world to try and crack it. So that's how we think about it.
You mentioned that you have over 50 patents, and some of them pertain to mobile wallets in the cloud. As retailers, credit card companies, and banks move more to the cloud, can you comment a little bit about how you think that might play out, given your intellectual property and some of what will be fundamental changes to their business start to be seen?
Sure. So a lot of our both licenses in China, our licenses in China as well as our patents here in the U.S. and in Korea are A, around tokenization, B, around money transfer through the cloud. So I think we have a really strong hand. I think from the perspective of people we'll be able to work with that will want to work with us will only enhance and help develop out our network. You know, I don't ever see us, I'm not a big, well, I don't believe in all in kind of I don't believe at all in the troll model of revenue generation. I believe in a lot in protecting our intellectual property and using that as a tool to partner with bigger players in this space. And look, conversely, Western Union is not going to be able to step on us. Sorry if there's anybody in the room from Western Union. They're a fine firm, but we'll protect ourselves. And I think retailers tend not to be super patent specific in this space, and it's just a great way to differentiate ourselves with some of those partners.
Hi, thanks so much for speaking to us. I really love the social value of what your company's doing. I have a question about innovation. I thought what you said is very, many people have observed how, as companies grow, it becomes about operations rather than making something new. But there are some companies, big companies, that have been successful in remaining innovative. Intuit's a good example, and Google, Google still do that. NVIDIA and some others. And they seem to have been able to do that by deliberately cultivating, creating a certain type of corporate culture and taking very deliberate steps to do that. So it seems like there's a shift in management strategy that is arising. I mean, now, Elon Musk and the Intuit CEO say they won't hire somebody with an MBA, or they're trying to avoid it because well, it's a little extreme. I know, but you know what I mean. Can you comment on how you might try and maintain an innovative culture within your company, or what you'd suggest?
Look, I think one of the most amazing models, I mean, I agree with you on all those firms you mentioned, but look at what General Electric's doing. Who 5 years ago would have thought GE would be the 5th largest software company in the world? They'll be at the heart of the Internet of Things. So I think it all boils down to leadership, right? I don't think it's, we're not going to hire MBAs, we're only going to hire engineers. You know what we're going to do? We're going to hire the best people we can find. And we're going to create an environment that stimulates them to create, that's focused on growth and products that matter to people. So I never have been a big believer in, we're only going to hire non-MBAs. We're not going to hire anybody that went to college because their thinking has been regimented. I think that's kind of made for TV headlines. I think you find and go and hire the best and brightest people. Look, frankly, I think Google's done that. You go hire the best and brightest people in the world and challenge them in that environment that almost requires them to be creative to succeed. So I don't think about it in those ways those guys do.
Appreciate it. And maybe just I'll close with one question talking about this innovation and trying to project maybe 10, 15 years from now, and Mozido's on the cover of Fortune as the most innovative, or one of the most innovative companies in the world. What did Mozido do differently than the other companies too?
So by the way, I have to tell you the other thing that always strikes me on innovation, there are broad ways to think about innovation. And based on where we are, we always think about it from a code, from a software perspective, and that's truly true. But when I was at HP, we did a marketing campaign called "The Computer is Personal Again." And when you think about innovation, we completely innovated around how you sell and market PCs. We went completely contrary to IBM had just sold to Lenovo, so everybody was going to sell to the Chinese. We completely innovated and fought through that. So our innovation in this year, 5 years, 10 years, is all going to be centered on how do we make it easier to have a wallet? How do we make it easier to have have a mobile-based payment system that lets you do anything, anywhere, anytime. You know, one of the hardest, it's always fun, you know, with meeting the Valley with people, but I was with Julian Robertson, who's 80, probably one of the best investors in history, and his partner, who's 90. And trying to explain mobile wallets to those two was a challenge, because when it starts with Julian telling his partner, look, man, you just got a cell phone. And this happened last Christmas, so it really takes you back to, it's not really unique, right? It's not unique when you think about the world that we live in, the world that we compete in. How do we take it so that it's so ubiquitous that it's like common sense, if that's the right word, that it's second nature to say, oh yeah, I got my cell phone and now I've got my wallet, and you know, my 7 businesses in the 7 cities around the world need money, and I'm just going to send cash. So that's the way we've got to think about it and stay focused on it.
Well, I'll say in closing, I think you win because you're at the lead, and you make time for people, and you care about your organization and the culture that you're building. And I think that's ultimately what's going to make you the winner in the end. So thank you so much, Todd. Thank you, everyone,
Thanks,
for
Marlon.
being here.
Thank you, guys.